What's up, Unleashed Humans? Hope you have been absolutely amazing, and I hope you are ready to get your world rocked on this new episode. Now, the last 1 hour episode I did a podcast episode on time-restricted eating, sleep, circadian rhythms, and exercise. Now, that episode was very science-heavy, but also gave you some pretty badass research and action steps to elevate your life. So if you haven't listened to that episode 6 to be exact, on circadian rhythms, I highly recommend you go back and check that out because it has some stuff that you may never heard ever in your life. So go ahead, check that out before you jump into today's podcast if you haven't. Now, if you listened to that episode and thought that was pretty science heavy, well, then today might just blow your pants off, all right? So make sure that you got a belt around your waist because we are jumping into the world of genetics and how your nutrition, your exercise, environment, and lifestyle choices literally affect your destiny every single day. Now, a lot of the information I talk about today comes from the work of Dr. Ben Lynch, who wrote the book Dirty Genes, which if you haven't read, you must read it. It is life-changing. Again, that is Dirty Genes by Dr. Ben Lynch. The world of genetics is super fascinating, and I'm so excited to share with you how genes affect not only your health, but will actually affect your personality, and it will start making more sense as to why you act a certain way that you do based off the genes that we're going to be talking about today. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is going to be extremely science heavy, filled with biochemical cycles, reactions, and processes, okay? Now, it's also going to be a very long episode, probably over an hour to an hour and 20, 30 minutes, okay? But it's going to be filled with a ton of information. So please rewind and listen to it again and again. Now, before we start today's amazing show, I want to mention to you that if you want to be more than average and to live life beyond limitation, then I invite you to get my free book by going to theunleashedhuman.com/unleashed with the www in front of it. Again, to get the Unleashed Human book online, totally free, just go to www.theunleashedhuman.com/unleashed and get your free book to take your life and performance to a whole nother universe. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into the world of genetics. Now, let's just get this straight right now. Your family genes that you were born with doesn't mean shit. You know what does mean shit? The way that you choose to live your life every day. That's what matters more than anything. Newsflash, that Twinkie you ate has consequences. That all-nighter you pulled has consequences. That broken relationship you're in has consequences. That old, decrepit house full of neurotoxic black mold has consequences. That job that has you constantly surrounded by heavy metals and toxic chemicals has consequences. That unfiltered tap water you drink every single day has consequences. The food you store in plastic containers, yes, plastic, has consequences. The alcoholic beverages you consume regularly has consequences. The constant exposure to blue light at night and disruption of circadian rhythms has consequences. Your sedentary lifestyle that has zero physical exercise in it has consequences. Are you understanding what I'm getting at just yet? And are you annoyed with me? Because you probably should be saying, TJ, shut up, get to the point. Well, if you haven't understood the point just yet, then I don't know if you're going to get it at all. Because if you understand it, I've already done my job. Now, the entire point of this episode is for you to understand that your genes are not your fate. Your lifestyle and your decisions are your fate. Let me say that again. How did you to choose your life? How you choose your life every single day through lifestyle is your fate, not your genes. Okay? Sure, you were born with the Alzheimer's gene. Sure, you were born with a dirty NOS3 gene, which just predisposes you to cardiovascular disease. Guess what? I have news for you. The only way you express your shitty genes is if you live a shitty life. This includes the way you eat, the amount of physical activity you engage in, your emotional well-being, and the environment in which you live. So good news, you aren't going to die unless you give your body a reason to die. Is that dark enough for you? Maybe. But here's the thing. Sometimes reality needs to slap you or someone in the face to wake you or someone you know up. Okay? So wake up. If you're living a shitty life, you don't have to live that way. Because if you are living a shitty life, your genes are going to take you down a road you don't want to go. Now, let's first start with the basics. There is a field of study that looks into how humans express their genetic makeup and genes through lifestyle factors. This field of study is known as epigenetics. Now, epigenetics studies how a person can either express or not express genes they were born with based off how healthy or unhealthy they are based on the choices they make in their life. In other words, you as a human can turn on or turn off bad genes that you were born with. To get even more specific, there is a fairly new subfield within epigenetics, which is called Nutrigenomics, which studies how food and dietary choices will directly affect our genetics and human genome. For instance, we all know eating donuts, sweets, sugars, and artificial flavors are downright toxic for the human body. By choosing these poor foods as a staple of our diet, we can instantly turn on our bad genes from the off switch to the on switch, thus leading us down the same road of diseases that our parents had or our grandparents suffered with. Heavily hereditary type diseases like dementias, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autoimmune diseases, and cardiovascular diseases are in this category. Now, when it comes to genes, there are those genes that have variation in the way that they are created. What I mean is that the configuration in the DNA code is only off by one base pair. For those who don't have a scientific background, DNA is made up of 4 base pairs: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. The way that they line up is always the same. Adenine is bonded with thymine, guanine is bonded with cytosine. So remember this, A is always with T, so A-T, at. And then G is with C, so G-C, okay? Now, if you just remember A is with T, then you will always know that G goes with C, okay? So just remember that way. Now, these base pairings bond together with hydrogen bridges to form long strands of DNA, along with a sugar phosphate backbone to give DNA its famous helix shape. If you feel lost in this description, just pull up your phone or laptop and search DNA structure under images, and you will see it more clearly and really understand what I'm talking about. Now, based off the sequences of the 4 base pairings will give a gene its genetic purpose and role inside your body. Much of the human genome has well-known genes that code for certain traits and characteristics. Genes like Alzheimer's, or genes for athletic performance, or genes for certain autoimmune conditions. Many of these genes have standard base pair patterns, but when one of these genes patterns is disrupted by just one single change in the base pairing, it will change the gene entirely. These single changes in gene coding and gene bases are known as single nucleotide polymorphisms. Again, if you didn't get that the first time, these changes in your genes by just one base pair are known as single nucleotide polymorphisms, also known as SNPs for short, which literally means a single nucleotide within the DNA base was changed. As a side note, a nucleotide is made up of 3 parts: a base Like adenine, the letter A that we talked about earlier is a base. And the two other parts of a nucleotide, like I said, is a 5-carbon sugar and a phosphate group. So again, a nucleotide is made up of a base, a 5-carbon sugar, and a phosphate group. This change in single nucleotides could have happened before or at birth, or this single nucleotide could have been changed due to poor lifestyle habits over time. Now, these SNPs in our genes can lead to deleterious effects later in our life if we continue to express our genetic variation through poor lifestyle choices, but can remain dormant if we choose to live smart. That is the big selling point. Now, there are many SNPs in our gene pool today, but there are very few that we have studied close enough to have solid evidence for. Now, there are nearly 20 to 25,000 genes in our body, yet there are more than 10 million variations, aka SNPs, and one person can have as many as 1.2 million of these SNPs. But there are only about 40,000 that are known to alter your genetic function. We are going to zone in on the most important and well-studied SNPs that have the biggest effect on your health. Now, before we get into the types of SNPs, we're going to talk about methylation, which is extremely important, and you need to really understand this physiological, biochemical process and why it is that it does what it does. Now, you see, methylation controls how your genes are expressed, or in other words, how your genes turn on or off. Methylation is the master regulator of all genes in every single cell of your body. Methylation, in the simplest way of explaining it, is adding a methyl group, which is 1 carbon atom and 3 hydrogen atoms to something, such as a gene, enzyme, hormone, neurotransmitters, and even vitamins in the body. Again, by adding a methyl group to these things, we'll either turn on something, expel it from the body, or create a physiological process. Now, when a methyl group is added to any of these compounds, they are considered to be methylated. When things are not methylated properly, this can spell disaster for your health and for your body. You can experience various things like acne, headaches, heavy menstrual cramping, bleeding, heart disease, diabetes, and even obesity. When genes are properly methylated, again, by a carbon with 3 hydrogens, they shut off poor genes that would normally lead to hereditary diseases like depression, anxiety, heart disease, dementia, obesity, and autoimmunity. Methylation helps convert food to energy so that you eat less and maintain a healthy weight. If you don't methylate properly, you will eat more, gain weight, and issues with blood sugar regulation will most likely spiral out of control, which will lead to you craving more carbohydrate-rich foods. Now, when you methylate properly, you will create carnitine, which will allow your body to burn more fat for fuel, which will stabilize your blood sugar. Methylation helps protect your cells by creating healthy cell membranes, which are walls that go around your cells to keep good nutrients inside and bad things out. Proper methylation creates phosphatidylcholine, which is the main ingredient and element in keeping your cell membrane strong and healthy. Phosphatidylcholine is also used to regulate cell death and create new cells. Phosphatidylcholine is, again, also used to create bile from your liver, because we need bile to help break down and absorb fat and to also keep our liver healthy. Now, methylation helps support brain and muscle health by producing creatine, which our brain and muscle use for fuel, and poor methylation could lead to muscle aches, pain, and fatigue. Methylation balances and protects our most important neurotransmitters like serotonin, our feel-good hormone, dopamine, our excitement hormone, norepinephrine, affecting our blood vessels and blood flow, and melatonin, our sleep hormone, which are all chemicals that transport messages to the rest of our body, known as neurotransmitters, as I said earlier. These keep us sharp, focused, calm, optimistic, and happy. If these are not methylated properly, you could suffer from depression, anxiety, brain fog, confusion, pessimism, and poor sleep, which many people suffer with today. Now, methylation balances stress and relaxation responses. With proper methylation, you can easily shift from being stressed to being relaxed, from normal rise and fall of stress hormones, epinephrine, aka adrenaline, and norepinephrine, which is noradrenaline. And cortisol also comes into this with being the stress hormone, and dopamine. But when you don't methylate properly, you will be in a constant state of stress in which your cortisol levels and epinephrine levels are constantly elevating, affecting your sleep and your emotional headspace. Your personality will be seen as always on edge and an easily pissed off person. And you are very, very unlikely to wind down, or you are constantly feeling burned out. Methylation helps in the ability to detoxify your body of wastes, chemicals, heavy metals, and excess hormones. It also gives your body the ability to produce glutathione, which is the body's strongest and master antioxidant. If the body can rid of waste or create antioxidants, the body will run rampant with free radicals, aka cancer-causing cells and inflammation, if it can't rid the waste from our body. Now, methylation helps your immune system stay strong. With poor methylation, you can have an underactive immune system, which allows bacteria and viruses to slip in without a fight and can lead to sickness. If your immune system is overactive, such as in autoimmune diseases, then your body will start attacking itself. Like I said, like an autoimmune disease, like rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's disease. Proper methylation finds that perfect medium for healthy immune responses. Methylation also provides cardiovascular support. Poor methylation can lead to atherosclerosis, aka hardening of the arteries or fatty plaques, and can increase the risk for hypertension, aka high blood pressure, which eventually leads to cardiovascular disease, aka heart disease. Methylation makes sure that your DNA is being protected, making sure that anytime your DNA is damaged, that it repairs any part of the structure that may be at risk for genetic mutation. Now, you're probably thinking, how does methylation go wrong, and what are the things I can do to make my methylation better? And I'm so glad you asked, because you are the one that asked it. It wasn't even me. First and foremost, a poor diet will make your methylation abilities piss poor. You need adequate protein. You need adequate B vitamins and many other key nutrients for proper methylation. You will find that some foods are not enough, and you might need micronutrients, cofactors, and vitamins. Secondly, if you find that you are not methylating properly, you need to add folate into your diet. Folate is the natural form of vitamin B9, which is found in dark leafy greens like spinach, mustard greens, collard greens, turnip greens, and romaine lettuce. Folate is extremely important because inside the body, it is turned into methylfolate, which is an absolutely essential ingredient for methylation. I need to clarify something with you right now. Folate is not the same thing as folic acid. Folic acid is the synthetic form of vitamin B9 that you find in vitamins. This is something you want to avoid, as folic acid blocks folate receptors in your cells, which means natural folate, which is the folate we want, cannot get inside the cell to create methylfolate, which will decrease your ability to methylate. If you see a vitamin that says folic acid in the form of B9, immediately drop that vitamin and throw it away. If you really need a supplement for more methylfolate, make sure the supplement says folate, not folic acid. If you have a known methylation problem, you might want to make sure to avoid or limit foods like bread, cornmeal, rice, pasta, cereal, flour, and other grains because these foods are heavily fortified with folic acid. We do not want folic acid. Thirdly, exercise is good and bad. The bad side of exercise can come if you work out too much, which can be overly taxing on your body in the form of physical demand and stress on your body to recover and repair tissues. The good side of exercise is obvious. Cardiovascular health, brain health, sleep health, muscle health, joint health, nervous system health are all boosted significantly when you engage in regular to moderate to vigorous exercise. We all know this. It's no surprise. But we all must know our own limits because exercise can be overdone. Stick to 45 minutes of exercise at least 3 to 4 times per week, both cardio and weight training. I also want to add a very interesting study testing genetic makeup in DNA after exercise. A study at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm had young, healthy men and women bicycle at a moderate pace with only one leg pushing the bicycle pedal on one side, while the other leg did nothing at all. At the end of the study, the researchers found that more than 5,000 sites on the muscle cell's genome showed new patterns of methylation, but only on the side that had been exercised, which is very, very fascinating. Fourth, on the agenda, nothing is surprising when it comes to having proper and quality sleep. We all know that from my previous episode on sleep, that if your sleep is disturbed or inadequate in your life will be a mess. But when you don't sleep well, you also don't methylate well. When you don't methylate well, then you will not produce enough melatonin, aka our sleep hormone. This will hinder your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. Can you see how these processes work in tandem together as a circle? One literally cannot work without the other. Now, fifth on the list is having emotional and physical stress in our life. This should be obvious, but most people don't know that their fast-paced life is actually killing them every day. Now, don't get me wrong, you can totally have a fast-paced life, but also reminding yourself to slow down and have your quiet times, things like meditation sessions, breathing sessions, participating in an activity that calms you, or by even getting a regular massage. Now, when your body is stressed, it uses a ton of methyl groups to keep your body alert and focused. Now, last on the list is being exposed to heavy metals, chemicals, plastics, mold toxins, and personal care products. These chemicals quite literally cause mutations in our genes, as they are extremely toxic to our cells, yet we continue to use personal care products like makeup with plastics in them, deodorant and aluminum straight into our armpits, toothpaste with fluoride, shampoos and body washes with parabens, and colognes and perfumes with toxic material sprayed all over our skin. These mess with our methylation more than you could ever imagine. Now, on this episode, we will be covering just a handful of the most studied genes, 7 genes to be exact. We will talk about how each of these genes can actually be the drivers of your personality and why you act the way you do. We will also discuss the kinds of symptoms, side effects, conditions, and risk factors with those with these certain genes. For instance, the first gene is MTHFR, which is short for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase and is known as a master regulator of your body's function. With a poor MTHFR gene, some days you will actually feel depressed and grumpy, while other days you feel anxious with snappy tempers and suffer from regular headaches. Now, the second gene is COMT, which is short for catechol-O methyltransferase, responsible for your catecholamines and major neurotransmitters. Things like dopamine, which is responsible for drive and confidence, norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are both responsible for focus and attention. These neurotransmitters are also responsible for having healthy sleep cycles. Now, there are 2 types of COMT genes. One is slow to burn and one is fast to burn. When your COMT is slow, Your neurotransmitters are always running and take much longer to expel from your body. You will have extreme focus, but your mind is constantly turning its wheels and you toss and turn thinking about tomorrow. You put stress on yourself to get projects done, you are sensitive to pain, and you can have regular headaches. All this is because your neurotransmitters are always flooding your body. This, again, is known as a slow Comt gene. Now, on the other hand, when you have a fast Comt gene, your neurotransmitters burn out quickly. This means that you have things like ADHD and cannot focus on anything. You are an impulse shopper in the moment because purchasing things brings you happiness, but the following day you wonder why you bought that and you feel regret. You also love human touch and hugs to fill your emotional need or void that is clearly lacking. This is because your feel-good hormones and your neurotransmitters run out quickly. This is, again, known as a fast Comt gene. The third gene on the list is DAO, which is short for D-amino acid oxidase, affecting a person's ability to respond to the natural inflammatory chemical histamine, which is found in food and bacteria, which will affect a person's ability to respond to environmental allergies and food sensitivities. A person with a bad DAO gene most likely has been through the gambit of food sensitivity testing and are sick of avoiding foods for fear of allergic reactions. Those with bad DAO genes will have reactions to food, such as being irritable, increased heart rates, perspiration after meals. They have headaches, they get itchy skin, eczema, hives, psoriasis, and even bloody noses. The fourth gene is GST and GPX, which are short for glutathione S-transferase and glutathione peroxidase, respectively. Now, it is obvious that these two genes are the major genes responsible for detoxifying our body, considering they both have the word glutathione in them. If you didn't know, glutathione is the strongest antioxidant and detoxifier of our body and is generated by our liver, as I said earlier. That being said, these two genes are responsible for ridding our body of toxic chemicals from our environment, like heavy metals, toxic mold, plastics, and gases. Having poor GSTs and GPX genes can make you extremely sensitive to perfumes, toxic molds, cats, dogs, pollens, hairsprays, shampoos, deodorants, soaps, heavy metals, chemicals, and will likely give you headaches within seconds to minutes of being around these substances. So if you've always wondered why you are super sensitive to everything around you, it's probably because you have a faulty GST or GPX gene. The fifth gene is MAO-A, which is short for monoamine oxidase A. The MAO-A gene affects your mood, sleep, carb cravings, sugar cravings, and energy levels because it directly controls dopamine, responsible for drive and confidence. It is responsible for serotonin, which is usually responsible for mood, and controls norepinephrine, responsible for focus and attention. Now, you can have a fast MAO-A or a slow MAO-A. Remember, with fast genes, hormones and neurotransmitters run out quickly, and with slow genes, hormones and neurotransmitters continually flood your body and take longer to break down. Now, if you have a slow MAO-A, you will get snappy with people. You will feel anxious. You will feel ashamed later for being overly hostile to people. These people will likely get headaches from chocolate, wine, and even cheese. And falling asleep for these people is pretty challenging almost all the time. If you have a fast MAO-A, you crave carbs and sugars more than anyone. When you eat or think of carbs, it instantly makes you feel better for a moment, but then you go into a carb coma after eating them. You know eating carbs is bad for you, but you cannot help it because they make your mood so much better. You've tried many diets, but while you are trying them, you feel super awful, super moody, and you are sad when you don't have carbs. Now, this sixth gene is NOS3, which is short for nitric oxide synthase 3, which is responsible for blood circulation, cardiovascular health, and nitric oxide production. These people are susceptible to stroke, heart attacks, and cardiovascular type diseases. When NOS3 genes are bad, there is a history of cardiovascular incidents in the family that the person constantly worries about. This person will typically have poor circulation, like having cold hands and feet, and even discoloration of the distal extremities. Now, the seventh and final gene we talk about is PEMT, which is short for phosphatidylethanol amine N-methyltransferase. Wow, that was quite the mouthful, wasn't it? PMT gene might be one of the most important genes we have, as it is the major producer of cell membranes that each and every single one of our cells can be protected from invaders and foreign pathogens. The PEMT gene protects our brain and liver cells more than you could ever imagine. When your PEMT gene isn't working well, you could have issues like poor digestion, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, aka SIBO. You can get gallstones, fatty liver, pregnancy troubles, and trouble focusing. You can typically do better on an omnivore type diet with both veggies and meat, but people with a faulty PEMT gene, if they go on a vegan or vegetarian diet, they typically don't feel too great, and they will notice things like brain fog, trouble paying attention, being spacey, and your body feels achy. You typically don't do well with fatty foods, and your liver isn't working like it should, and you have a history of gallstones. Phew, wow. So there you have it. Those are the genes we will be discussing on this episode. Now, you might be thinking, TJ, how do I see if I'm expressing these genes poorly or if I have a single nucleotide polymorphism relating to these genes? Well, the first thing I will tell you is that one of the best ways to know if you have one of these 7 genes that has been turned against you is to listen to your body first, feeling for symptoms, conditions, or reactions that are normally associated when one of these 7 genes has been turned bad. Nobody knows you and your body more than you know yourself. So as hippy-dippy as it sounds, you need to be in tune to your body and listen to how it feels. Then you will be able to correlate which gene or genes need cleaning up. When we go through all of the genes that we're going to be talking about on this episode, you're going to start seeing patterns and you're going to start noticing certain genes that you associate with, meaning that certain symptoms that you've been having are very much aligned with certain genes that may be messed up. So by just listening to this episode and hearing different characteristics from different genes, you may already know which genes of yours are faulty without even doing testing. Now, the second thing you can do to figure out if your genes are messed up is to invest in your health and send away for your genes to be tested. In the world we live in today, our ability to test our genes and to get very descriptive summaries about who we are is very cheap and very accessible compared to what it used to be. You can choose from many different gene testing companies. However, there is a current gold standard that opens doors for you to dive deep into your genetics and ancestry. That being said, I would first purchase a 23andMe DNA kit from 23andme.com. They will send you a kit in the mail with instructions, and all you have to do is spit your saliva into a test tube and send it back to them. I recommend purchasing the $199 kit, which tests both ancestry and health risks based on your genes. The reason why you should start with 23andMe is because 23andMe gives you your raw genetic data that is pages long and allows you to upload it to other websites like go.strategene.org or dnafit.com. Now, Gene was created by Dr. Ben Lynch, and he breaks down all of your genes down to the very tiniest of detail, which is much more detailed than 23andMe. Also, you can upload that same raw data from 23andMe onto DNAfit.com, and based off your genes, they will tell you which foods to eat, what kind of athlete you are, either endurance-based or strength-based, and how you should work out to optimize your human performance. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that is pretty freaking badass. And I'm in the process myself of getting all of my genes uploaded to all the sites, and that will be an entire other episode for another time, breaking down my own genes and telling you my strengths, my weaknesses, and how I can make myself better. Now, with all of this out of the way, let's kind of dive into each gene one by one and see which genes you might need to address and the things you can do to clean up your tainted genes. Now, first on the docket is the Mthfr gene. The Mthfr gene is the mother lord of all genes. That is the gene that is responsible for all the methylation that occurs in our bodies. As we mentioned earlier, methylation occurs when we add a methyl group to hormones, neurotransmitters, and various compounds or molecules in our bodies for proper physiological functioning of cells, tissues, and organ systems. When you have a dysfunctional Mthfr gene, your immune system becomes compromised due to low antioxidant output. Your detoxification pathways can expel environmental and endogenous chemicals. Your brain synapses and neural pathways suffer, and your cellular repair systems become weakened. You will typically experience sensitivities to chemicals in the environment. You will be easily pissed off, and you will always be on edge or anxious, and you could even suffer from depression and experience massive brain fog. However, a dysfunctional Mthfr gene on good days can have upsides like having great alertness and focus, good productivity, and good DNA repair. That being said, a healthy Mthfr gene is extremely important to have on your side. Now, the various conditions and symptoms you may have with a faulty Mthfr gene are: a child of yours is on the autism spectrum. You had to either get something going on with your pregnancy to become pregnant. So things like having to get in vitro fertilization, aka IVF. You have low functioning thyroid, aka hypothyroid. You rarely eat green leafy vegetables, but you feel better after having green leafy vegetables. Your laboratory homocysteine levels are above 12 micromoles per liter. Folate and B12 levels might be elevated. A child of yours has Down syndrome. You don't do well with alcoholic beverages. Your white blood cell count has been on the lower side of normal for most of your life. And your menstrual cramps have clotting in them within the menstrual fluid. Now, these are some of the more common conditions and symptoms you may have. But before I can tell you how to fix a dysfunctional Mthfr gene, you must first understand the biochemical pathway that is accomplished. Now, stick with me because this is about to get extremely science heavy and is going to be very wordy. Okay? So stay with me, listen carefully. Are you ready? Because here we go. Now, the Mthfr gene will pass off a methyl group to folate, which is vitamin B9. This will turn folate into methylfolate. Then methylfolate will donate its methyl group to homocysteine, which is an amino acid in the blood. Homocysteine then turns into methionine, which is an essential amino acid in the form of S-adenosyl methionine, or SAMe, also known as SAMe. This SAMe molecule then donates the same methyl group that started all of this out on to 100 different functions of the human body to do physiological processes. This leaves us with a molecule of homocysteine, which is the end product of methylation, but it is also the start of methylation. Now, this homocysteine, which is the end product, can either go back to the methylation cycle, or it can be used to create our strongest antioxidant, glutathione. In a healthy body, homocysteine will always choose to go back into the methylation cycle. But in a body with a ton of inflammation and free radical production, it will choose to make more glutathione to kill free radicals, aka cancer-causing chemicals. Whew, wow. Well, I hope I didn't lose you there, but chances are I did, but that's totally okay. That's why we have the luxury to rewind and listen. And to be quite honest, I actually recommend and advise you to rewind that last part, to be honest, because you need to understand that. It's vitally crucial that this cycle works because it's the major way in which we methylate compounds. For instance, there are 3 extremely important compounds we need to methylate. First is melatonin. In order to make melatonin, we must be able to methylate serotonin because methylated serotonin becomes melatonin. Literally, by adding a methyl group to serotonin, this allows us to make melatonin so that we can sleep at night. Pretty sweet, huh? I would also say it's pretty important, okay? Now, second is phosphatidylcholine, responsible for making cell walls that we talked about earlier, to keep out pathogens, viruses, and bacteria. When you methylate choline, which is found in animal meats, this turns into phosphatidylcholine, and voila, you got protection all around your cells. Third is creatine, which is a super important chemical for brain health, muscle, motor function, and everything of our nervous system. When a compound called guanidinoacetate acetate is methylated, it turns into creatine, and boom, bada bing, you got creatine. Now, on the other hand, there are compounds that our body expels when we methylate them or when we add methyl groups to them. First is arsenic. Arsenic is very toxic, but when we methylate arsenic, our antioxidant glutathione flushes the arsenic out of the body with the rest of the waste products we collect every day. Second is estrogen. Methylated estrogen is rapidly expelled from the body, and when we don't methylate estrogen properly, it leads to heavy PMS symptoms and risk for estrogen-induced cancers like breast, ovarian, and uterine cancer. Third and lastly is histamine. Histamine is normally healthy under controlled levels because histamine is released whenever we have cuts, bruises, responses to environmental allergies, and occasional colds or illnesses. However, histamine must be methylated so that it can be shuttled out of the body, or else it will build up and cause issues like difficulty sleeping, having sensitivities to food, and sensitivities to bacteria. You can get your homocysteine levels checked by doing lab studies. However, they don't always tell you the entire story. A rule of thumb is that you don't want your homocysteine levels above 7 or 8. When your homocysteine levels are high, this means they are blocked, and you are at risk for cardiovascular diseases, cancers, infertility, neurological disorders, and passing congenital defects to your children. If you take supplements or medication to lower your homocysteine and they still remain high, it's because you could be suffering from small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, you are undernourished, you could have heavy metal exposure, too much folic acid in your diet, which blocks methylation, you could have yeast infections, and you could be having other dysfunctional genes that are also affecting all the other genes. Now, here's the bottom line. If you want a healthy Mthfr gene, eat the following foods. First, vitamin B12, aka riboflavin. Things like wild salmon, eggs, spinach, almonds. Vitamin B9, aka folate. Things like green veggies and squash. Third, vitamin B12, aka cobalamin. Things like red meat, eggs, and salmon. You need adequate protein, things like beef, lamb, fish, beans, peas, lentils, broccoli, nuts, seeds. And you need adequate magnesium, things like dark leafy greens, fish, avocados, and nuts. Now, that is it for the MTHFR gene. So let's go on to the next gene. And the next gene on the agenda is the COMT gene. Now, I will make this a gene a little bit easier to follow than the MTHFR gene. Now, the COMT gene, as we mentioned earlier, is in charge for your catecholamines, things like dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, which keep you confident, focused, alert, and energized. Now, there is a slow COMT and a fast COMT. A slow COMT will have strengths and weaknesses. Strengths will make a person very enthusiastic, giving a lot. They're a very giving person. They have high energy, super productive, and can focus for long periods of time. The weaknesses of a slow COMT will be trouble sleeping because their mind races constantly. They cannot stop thinking about work or the projects they're working on. And in women, this slow COMT gene, they have a very hard time eliminating estrogen because estrogen isn't methylated fast enough, which leads to estrogen buildup. And it is known that when you have a lot of estrogen, it actually enhances sex and the health of your skin. So you'll have glowing skin, but you will have intense PMS activity, and your estrogen-related cancer risk goes up significantly. Now, on the other side, a fast COMT will also have strengths and weaknesses. Strengths will be having great sleep, a relaxed personality, mostly stress-free life, and open to many ideas, or they are really just easygoing people. The weaknesses are that these people cannot focus for too long. They cannot remember things well, and their energy levels usually are low and have a predisposition towards depression. Now, before we can talk about how to fix a slow or fast COMT, let's cover some physiology. First, dopamine is a neurotransmitter responsible for fear, excitement, thrill, the unknown, and is the ultimate feel-good reward after accomplishing something. It is dopamine that drives us to seek reward and pleasure, from high-stakes gambling to taking hardcore drugs to being on a first date to jumping off a 100-foot cliff. It is the ultimate rush. Second is epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is, in the simplest terms, adrenaline, which gets your body fired up and energized to keep focused. Whether that's preparing for a big speech in front of a massive crowd, jumping out of an airplane, running away from a bear, or simply asking a girl of your dreams to marry you. These are evolutionary neurotransmitters that have been with us since the dawn of time to keep our body alive and alert during stressful times. They are also there to make sure we stay sharp as we age. Now, when COMT gene is slow, dopamine and adrenaline constantly pump through your system all day and even into the night because your body isn't able to properly expel these neurotransmitters fast enough. Hence why it is called a slow COMT. Thus, a slow COMT disrupts sleep, makes you constantly anxious, gives you headaches, and you always feel irritable. However, as mentioned, sexual function will be higher, productivity will be amazing, and your skin will look much healthier. Now, when COMT is fast, dopamine and adrenaline are exhausted very quickly, and in turn will make someone less energetic with the inability to focus as well. They will be super distracted and will be much more prone to feeling the blues due to the lack of dopamine. They will also have a poor sexual functioning due to the elimination of estrogen too quickly, and they will have drier skin. On the other side of the token, this person will be much more approachable, easygoing, and will have great sleep. Now, the contributors for a slow COMT are low homocysteine levels, having too much caffeine, being overweight, exposure to plastics, which lead to much more estrogen. Now, contributors for a fast COMT are having too much S-adenosylmethionine, aka SAMe, that we talked about earlier. Now, you're probably asking, how do we fix the COMT gene? Glad you asked, buddy. For a healthy COMT gene, we need to have a healthy Mthfr gene, aka healthy methylation first, by having adequate levels of vitamin B12, vitamin B9, and vitamin B2. Protein and magnesium is also just as important as we talked about with Mthfr. Magnesium is huge, as more than half of the United States does not have enough magnesium in their diets. The biggest reason for magnesium deficiencies comes from caffeine intake and overusing antacids, aka proton pump inhibitors. To clean your COMT gene in general, do these following things. First, eat organic produce and meat always. Practice meditation or stress relief activities. Stay away from heavy metals and environmental toxins. Go to bed on a fixed schedule and follow the same routine. Lose weight if you're overweight. Simple as that. And avoid all plastics and BPA, aka bisphenol A. Plastics are literally everywhere these days. You need to start using glassware instead. Now, specifically for slow COMT people, aka those who are stressed and work themselves to death, these people must do meditation, yoga, and breathing drills. Doing moderate to vigorous exercise is also a must to burn off some steam for these people. Take time away from work and enjoy time spent with family. Avoid daily caffeine from foods and drinks. Now, specifically for fast COMT people, aka super chill people who cannot focus to save their life. These people need proper sleep, although they sleep well. When we sleep, we create more dopamine, which is something they actually lack. So more sleep will actually help them make more dopamine. These people also need high quality protein and they need to stay away from sugars. These people should be engaging in brain-related activities like learning an instrument, solving puzzles, or doing neuromuscular retraining activities like brushing their teeth with their non-dominant hand. Lastly, these people should get daily hugs to boost feel-good hormones and can even engage in drinking some coffee or tea to give them that boost that they're lacking. And with that, that is the COMT gene for you. Now, let's go on to the third gene. The next gene we're going to be covering is the DAO gene, which might be one of my favorites, to be quite honest. Now, the DAO gene is the simplest terms. I will tell you that the reason why it might be faulty or the things that you might be feeling is that you are oversensitive to foods, which many people today are actually allergic to way too many foods. Now, with the craze over eliminating inflammatory foods like gluten, dairy, and fermented foods, you are surely going to want to listen to this part of the episode. In other words, these people have a struggle against a little known chemical we call histamine that is responsible for our response to environmental allergens and the health of our gut. So the cool thing is that histamine also acts as a neurotransmitter that regulates our emotion and the way we think. The DAO gene is responsible for the DAO enzyme, which is found mostly in the small intestine, kidney, prostate, and colon. This enzyme is responsible for our ability to expel histamine from the body. Otherwise, we will suffer from food sensitivities, hives, itchiness, skin rashes, environmental allergies, neurological disorders, seasickness, car sickness, leaky gut, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, indigestion, migraines, and pregnancy issues. That's a lot. That's why the DAO gene is so important. Now, the advantage of having a poor DAO gene is that you are likely to notice things before anyone else. You are basically a canary in a coal mine, letting everyone know what's happening, meaning that when you have a sensitivity, this is giving you a warning sign earlier on, way earlier on in your life before disease sets in, when other people may get warning signs too late and they don't have time to respond like you. Thus, you are much better suited to live a healthy life by avoiding things that make you sick. There are a couple things you can test for histamine intolerances. You can run a food allergy test to see which foods you create antibodies against. Then eliminate these foods from your diet and see how you do. The other thing you can do is eliminate known foods for creating allergies like dairy, gluten, nuts, seeds, and soy to see how you do. You will know if you're allergic to certain foods if you have certain things like eczema or itchy skin, noticeable increases in heart rate after eating a certain food, and even headaches. There are times where these self-testing methods actually may not work though, which may be because you have multiple things happening. For instance, if your methylation pathways from Mthfr genes aren't working, then the Dao gene won't work well either. If you have potential pathogens like viral or bacterial infections, this will hinder your ability to have a healthy DAO. If you have low stomach acid and enzymes, then this could be the reason for viral or bacterial infections, thus leading to illness and poor digestion. That being said, if you have a leaky gut or damaged gut lining, then your Dao gene cannot be healthy either. You could also be born with a mutated Dao gene, which leaves you with a lower than normal ability to break down and process histamine, which, when someone eats a high histamine food or drink, will create more problems. The following are things you probably want to avoid if you have a poor Dao gene. First, eliminate histamine-containing foods and liquids, things like alcohols, all of them. Eliminate chocolate, citrus fruits, vinegars, tomatoes, smoked meats, dried fruit, fruit juices, bone broth, and all fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, pickles, sauerkraut, sour cream, kombucha, and fermented vegetables. Second, poor microbiomes, leaky guts, and having small intestine overgrowth, yeast infections, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, and taking antacids all lead to inflammation and a huge production of histamine, which spells disaster for a poor Dao gene. Third, eliminate gluten and your known food sensitivities. Fourth, eliminate emotional and physical stress as they affect your hormone cycles, which can also lead to inflammation of your gut microbiome. Fifth, don't eat too much protein. A good rule of thumb is to have 20% of your plate animal meat and the rest of the plate 80% vegetables with lots of color and leafy greens in nature. The key nutrients you will need to create a healthy Dao gene are calcium and copper. So with calcium, the foods high in calcium are things like almonds, broccoli, bok choy, sprouted grains, kale, and goat or sheep milk or cheese. And for copper, which is found in almonds, asparagus, beef liver, turnip greens, sunflower seeds, and lentils. Now, here are some other tips for a healthy Dao gene. You should also stop taking any probiotics that contain Lactobacillus casei and Lactobacillus bulgaricus. These will not help you, so stop them now. Women also need to make sure to have healthy levels of estrogen, as higher levels of estrogen lead to generation of more histamine. This means avoiding plastics, balancing their weight, and eating more cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, kale, and cauliflower. Now, for a Dao gene, make sure that you have adequate amounts of stomach acid and digestive enzymes. You should be taking a digestive enzyme regularly. I recommend checking out Pure Encapsulation's Ultra Digestive Enzyme. That's what I take almost every day. Now, for a Dao gene, you should also optimize sleep by going to bed at the same time each night. Wind down by turning off screens and putting blue blocking glasses on 1 hour after the sun goes down. Read a book instead of TV, social media, and video games. Also make sure to practice meditation and breathing drills because chronic stress will lead to more histamine by our neurotransmitters. And with that being said, that is the Dao gene in a nutshell. Now, let's move on to our fourth gene on the agenda, and that is MAOA, also known as monoamine oxidase A. This gene is responsible for processing dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine helps you produce serotonin, which helps us feel good, while norepinephrine, as we said earlier, helps you ramp up during any kind of stressful activity during the day. Now, having a dysfunctional MAOA can give you insane mood swings, but can also give you laser focus and energy. It is also known as the carb craving gene because when you eat carbs, it makes you feel better for a short time, but then you crash. You feel that your body is always craving carbs to make you happy, but you really know that you should not be eating carbs, but your body wants them so bad. Now, just as there was a slow and fast COMT, there is also a slow and fast MAOA. A slow MAOA gene expels your neurotransmitters much slower, which will keep neurotransmitters flowing in your body for much longer. Symptoms of a slow MAOA are usually difficulties falling asleep, mood swings, anxiety, aggressive behavior, headaches, and trouble falling asleep, as I said, and trouble relaxing. Now, strengths of a slow MAOA, when you aren't stressed, are having high alertness, you're cheerful, focused, productive, and energetic. On the other side, a fast MAOA gene expels your neurotransmitters very rapidly and leaves you lacking your feel-good hormone and alertness hormones. Signs of a fast MAOA are usually carb or sugar cravings, addictive personalities, drug abusers, alcoholics, depression, difficulty staying asleep, and constant fatigue. Strengths of a fast MAOA, when you are stressed, is that you have an easier ability to calm down and you are generally more easygoing even during stress. Now, as a side note, when you are stressed, your body produces excess norepinephrine and dopamine. This means MAOA needs to work overtime to expel all the stress neurotransmitters you are creating. When MAOA breaks down your neurotransmitters, it creates a byproduct. This byproduct is hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is known to turn hair gray and white. This means the more stressed out you are, the more MAOA has to work to break down your stressed neurotransmitters, which creates more hydrogen peroxide, which means more gray and white hair for you. The only way to expel hydrogen peroxide is by way of glutathione, but at a certain point, glutathione runs out and hydrogen peroxide overtakes your system, leading to early aging and early graying. Not only is hydrogen peroxide a cosmetic problem, but it also is a neurological problem because more hydrogen peroxide means extreme brain stress. You can suffer from memory problems and erratic moods. If it gets chronic enough, it can lead to amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, more commonly known as ALS. You can also develop Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease. You're probably wondering why the MAOA gene becomes messed up. Well, I'll tell you, 2 reasons are likely. The first reason is that you are constantly stressed physically and emotionally. Things like having poor digestion, damaged gut lining, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, yeast infections, physical stress like working out, or not being able to breathe properly, and emotional stress like worrying too much about work or just being stressed about life in general will affect the MAOA gene. For a slow MAOA, you likely have too much tryptophan, which is an amino acid responsible for making serotonin, our feel-good hormone, which then serotonin creates melatonin, responsible for quality sleep. Also, by having too little vitamin B2 or riboflavin, this slows your MAOA. For a fast MAOA, it is the exact opposite. Low tryptophan and high riboflavin or vitamin B12 is the instigator for a fast MAOA. Foods rich with tryptophan are things like mushrooms, asparagus, spinach, seaweed, and pumpkin seeds. Foods rich with riboflavin, aka vitamin B2, are things like liver, spinach, almonds, lamb, eggs, and wild-caught salmon. With that being said, that is the Mao-a gene. Now, the fifth gene on our list, or I guess I should say genes of discussion, is GST/GPX, which are the genes responsible for glutathione production and immunity. First, we're going to be talking about the GST gene, which makes the GST enzyme, which helps transfer glutathione onto xenobiotics, which are the things like perfumes, heavy metals, plastic, herbicides, and pesticides, and expel them from your body via urine. If your GST enzyme doesn't work well, then these toxins build up and destroy your mitochondria, your DNA, and your cell membranes. A faulty GST gene will lead to hypersensitivity to environmental chemicals and allergens. Symptoms will include watery eyes, migraines, rashes, congestion, high blood pressure, hives, anxiety, runny noses, digestion problems, and being overweight. Now, on the other side of things, the GPX gene makes the GPX enzyme, which attaches glutathione onto hydrogen peroxide, like we talked about earlier. By attaching glutathione onto hydrogen peroxide, we expel hydrogen peroxide from our body, because otherwise we will start graying early, you will have memory problems, you will always feel irritable, and feel fatigued often. The reason for having dysfunctional GST and GPX genes are from a handful of reasons. First, being exposed to heavy metals, toxic bacteria, industrial chemicals, and plastics. Second, having chronic mental and physical stress will tamper with your methylation cycles. Third, disrupting methylation cycles will hinder your ability to even create glutathione. Fourth, having insufficient vitamin B2, aka riboflavin, which is a big contributor to making glutathione. Fifth is lacking enough selenium, because in order for glutathione to turn hydrogen peroxide into water, you need selenium. Sixth is not having enough cysteine, which is the key ingredient in making glutathione. This being said, to have a healthy GST and GPX gene, you need a few things. First is cysteine, which is found in red meat, turkey, asparagus, eggs, broccoli, onions, sunflower seeds, chicken, and cabbage. Second is riboflavin, aka vitamin B2, things like liver, spinach, almonds, lambs, eggs, and wild-caught salmon. Third is selenium, which is found in liver, tuna, sardines, brown rice, eggs, Brazil nuts, chicken, and beef. Another thing you must understand for a healthy GST and GPX gene is having healthy sulfur levels, because sulfur is required to make glutathione. You can get sulfur from dietary protein and cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, and kale. You can also get it from supplementation such as methylsulfonyl aka MSM, and N-acetylcysteine, aka NAC or NAC. However, I must mention, if you smell like rotten eggs with sulfur odors coming from your armpits, breath, stool, and gas, then you are high in hydrogen sulfide, and you may want to cut back on sulfur-containing foods and supplements. You might want to get a comprehensive digestive stool analysis to check out your microbiome and how it is actually processing sulfur. Now, sulfur foods and supplements, making sure cutting out sulfur foods from your diet is not healthy. Again, I'm going to say that again. Cutting out sulfur foods from your diet is not healthy. You may feel good when you first do this, but your glutathione will plummet and will start causing problems on the other extreme if you completely go away from eliminating sulfur foods. Now, to clean up a GST and a GPX gene, do the following things. First, eat more fiber, because your microbiome loves fiber, unless you have SIBO, aka small intestine bacterial overgrowth. You need to address SIBO first. Now, You can get more fiber from things like artichokes, avocados, blackberries, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, oatmeal, pears, and raspberries. You must also, for a clean GST and GPX gene, clean up your environment. Use filtered water, eat organic food, clean indoor air, and avoid toxic products. You must evaluate your environment for mold at work, home, and in your car. And if your symptoms still persist after cleaning your environment, then you should probably get a professional to check everything for you. The other thing for a clean GST and GPX gene is to make sure that you get a good workout in every once in a while. Your body detoxifies in 4 different ways. First, breathing. Second is pooping. Third is peeing. And fourth is sweating. Now, you also need to drink a lot of water, eat fiber for good poops, sweat at least 2 times a week, either sauna, hot yoga, sex, vigorous exercise, or even Epsom salt baths. Here's the bottom line. For your diet, for the GST and GPX gene, you need to eat fiber, sulfur, and riboflavin, aka vitamin B2. You need to eat healthy fats, making sure to cut out processed carbs, sugars, and unhealthy fats. You need to have healthy protein levels, but limit excessive intake. Avoid chemicals like industrial chemicals, and breathe, sweat, pee, and poop out all the toxins as much as you can. Now, lastly, limit stress. Stress relief lightens burden on the Mao-a gene, which decreases hydrogen peroxide production, which lightens the burden on GPX. And that is it when it comes to GST and GPX gene. Now, guys, we're almost there. We're going to our 6th gene on the agenda, and that is the NOS3 gene, which is responsible for our cardiovascular health and for our blood flow. Now, those who want to get bigger pumps in the gym and those who want family members to be healthy, but they also have family members with a history of cardiovascular disease, you're going to want to listen up when it comes to the NOS3 gene, because the NOS3 gene makes nitric oxide, which is responsible for blood flow and blood vessel formation. When our NOS3 gene isn't working properly, you don't produce as much nitric oxide, which won't dilate as much, which will lead to blood clotting, sticking to the walls of your arteries. This can lead to a person having chest pains, high blood pressure, migraines, erectile dysfunction, depression, cold hands and feet, heart attack, slow healing wounds, and mouth breathers. The only upside of having a poor NOS3 gene is the fact that cancer won't spread as fast because of decreased blood flow. Now, having a poor NOS3 gene plays a big role in diabetics. This is because diabetics are known to have poor blood circulation already. Diabetics have cold legs, ulcers. They usually get toes amputated if it gets bad enough. They have loss of vision, all due to poor blood flow from lack of nitric oxide. Now, in a normal healthy human, insulin pushes NOS3 to create nitric oxide. But in diabetics, because insulin does not work properly, NOS3 creates superoxide instead, which is the most dangerous free radical in the body, aka a cancer-causing molecule. Now, a faulty NOS3 gene is also linked to dementia and cognitive decline because increased levels of homocysteine leads to high levels of asymmetrical dimethyl arginine, aka ADMA, which is a blood plasma component. Higher levels of ADMA is found in conditions such as Alzheimer's and dementia, and as I mentioned, Alzheimer's is one of the main disorders associated with NOS3. Interestingly enough, the secondary cause of death from Alzheimer's is actually heart disease, which makes total sense. If your brain is inflamed, this means that methylation is messed up, which affects NOS3 gene. Thus, NOS3 starts making superoxide, which will then lead to cardiovascular issues. So connect the dots and you got yourself the answer. Now, you're probably thinking, what makes NOS3 dysfunctional? There is a whole laundry list of reasons, so hold on to your britches as I tell you all of the things that make NOS3 bad. Now, first is breathing abnormalities, folic acid, high blood sugar, high carb intake, high homocysteine levels, high insulin levels, infection, inflammation, lack of movement, whether that's sitting, standing, laying down, having low antioxidants, low arginine, low estrogen, low glutathione, low oxygen, microbiome imbalance, being a mouth breather, overeating, oxidative stress, poor methylation, pollution, sinus congestion, sleep apnea, smoking, snoring, stress, and even having a tongue tie. All these things can affect the way that your NOS3 function because they all have to do with blood flow and oxygen saturation. It is important to note that NOS3 is also affected by other dysfunctional genes. First, having a dysfunctional MTHFR will increase homocysteine, which increases ADMA, and then ADMA uncouples NOS3, leading to superoxide. The second gene is having a dysfunctional GST or GPX gene decreases glutathione's ability to remove xenobiotics and hydrogen peroxide, leading to lower BH4, leading to superoxide. Third, having a dysfunctional PMT, which we're going to discuss next, creates weak cell membranes, leading to inflammation, pulling arginine away from NOS3, causing uncoupling, which leads to superoxide. Fourth, by having a slow MAOA and or dysfunctional COMT increases stress, slowing methylation and raising homocysteine, which will increase ADMA, and it uncouples NOS3, leading to superoxide. And fifth and finally, MAOA, a fast MAOA, increases hydrogen peroxide, which leads to an uncoupled NOS3 gene, which again leads to superoxide. All of these 5 genes that I just mentioned all affect the way that NOS3 works, which means all the genes that we discussed today have a feed-forward, feed-backward mechanism, meaning they all rely on each other. Now, for a healthy NOS3, this is what you will need. First, arginine is absolutely incredible for an NOS3 gene to work properly. Arginine is an amino acid that turns into nitric oxide in the body. You can get arginine from foods like turkey breast, pork loin, chicken, pumpkin seeds, spirulina, dairy products from goat or sheep, chickpeas, and lentils. These all have arginine. Second will be tetrahydrobiopterin, aka BH4, which is produced by getting enough folate, magnesium, and zinc, which directly supports your MTHFR so that your body makes more BH4. NOS3 also needs calcium, iron, and vitamin B2, aka riboflavin. For calcium, you can eat dairy from goat or sheep, dark leafy greens, bok choy, okra, broccoli, green beans, or almonds. For iron, eat squash and pumpkin seeds, chicken liver, oysters, mussels, clams, cashews, pine nuts, hazelnuts, almonds, beef, lamb, white beans, lentils, dark leafy greens. For riboflavin, aka vitamin B2, liver, lamb, mushrooms, spinach, almonds, wild salmon, and eggs. Now, for NOS3 to work properly, it also needs oxygen. This means do not mouth breathe. Get sleep studies if you need. See if your tongue is tied. Eliminate snoring issues. You need to exercise more. Stop smoking. Fix congestion. And practice breathing drills. It's vitally important that an NOS3 gene gets oxygen. And lastly, for the NOS3 gene, Try consuming natural nitrates that support nitric oxide production, things like arugula, bacon, beets, celery, and spinach. And that is all for the NOS3 gene. Now, for the seventh and final gene, we talk about PEMT, which is phosphatidylethanol amine N-methyltransferase. This may just be one of the most vital genes we have to keep our cells alive, which keep us alive. That is because PEMT produces phosphatidylcholine, which is the main element of our cell membranes, which keep bad guys out and good guys in. Our cell membrane is the only way our cells stay alive and absorb vital nutrients. Phosphatidylcholine is the one of the most important in pregnant women and children because cells are rapidly being produced in both of these demographics, and the cells need it for all the cell membranes that are being produced. Phosphatidylcholine also helps secrete bile from our liver to help with digestion and making sure bacteria doesn't reside in our gut. We also need it to move triglycerides out of the liver so we don't get fatty liver. Lastly, we need phosphatidylcholine for our brain, muscle, and nervous system health. PEMT gene also makes choline, which is extremely important for our ability to move, speak, think, create memories, memory recall, and perform movements. Now, with a dysfunctional PEMT gene, you will have things like muscle pain, fatigue, pregnancy complications, fatty liver, or gallbladder issues, elevated triglycerides, and small intestine bacterial overgrowth. The only upside of a poor PEMT is that your body retains a lot of choline, which will then give you the ability to focus and pay attention, as choline is very good for cognition and brain processing. Those most likely to suffer from a poor PEMT gene are pregnant women and children because, as we stated earlier, they are rapidly using phosphatidylcholine to create a ton of new cell membranes due to the rapid demand of new cells each second. Vegans and vegetarians are also at risk because this demographic does not get a lot of choline from vegetable sources as much. Most of the choline that we need from our diets actually comes from animal sources and eggs. Those people on low protein diets are also at risk because they have low choline due to low protein. But this does not mean to load up on your protein. Remember, 20% animal protein, 80% veggies on your plate. Postmenopausal women are also at risk for low choline because of the massive drop in estrogen. Healthy levels of estrogen is known to trigger phosphatidylcholine, but when estrogen gets low, then choline also becomes low. Men are at risk more than women because men don't have as much estrogen, and as I said, estrogen triggers more choline. The things that create poor PEMT genes are not having enough choline, not having enough SAMe from your methylation cycle, not having enough methylfolate, and not having adequate levels of estrogen. Now, how do you make sure that your PEMT genes work for you? Well, let's talk about that right now. First, if it wasn't obvious enough, get more choline in your diet. Eat foods like liver, red meat, chicken, eggs, and fish, beets, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, spinach, and asparagus. Second, eat less food so that your digestion doesn't have to work overtime. Digestion is a very stressful and demanding physiological process. Eat slowly, chew a lot, and eat 3 meals tops. Stop eating by 6 p.m. or eat within a 9 to 11 hour window. Third, learn stress management tactics like breathing drills, meditation, and yoga. When our bodies are stressed, it uses massive amounts of choline. Fourth, eat a lot of green leafy vegetables to support your methylation cycle. Fifth, reduce refined carbohydrates like crackers and chips. Choose more proteins like wild-caught fish and grass-fed meats for choline. Sixth, limit alcohol consumption, as it adds a lot of stress to your liver, which we need in order to secrete bile and digestive juices. Lastly, cook with oils that have high smoke points. Oils like avocado oil and ghee. If you haven't heard of ghee, it is spelled Ghee, which is clarified butter, which means milk solids have been removed, and it is what a lot of people who have dairy sensitivities use instead of butter. By having a higher smoke point, these oils will not oxidate and they will not create free radicals. So don't use olive oil or coconut oil to cook things, because you will start creating free radicals from the oxidation of fats. And with that, those are some of the genes that shape your health, your personality, and your life. Whew. Now, that was a ton of information. I know. And holy cow, it was a lot of information for me too. That being said, you should 1000% rewind and listen to some parts of this again. Also, I highly recommend you buy Dr. Ben Lynch's book called Dirty Genes. That's Dr. Ben Lynch, Lynch. This book drastically changed the way I think about nutrition, lifestyle, and epigenetics, so please go check it out. Now, with that being said, that is it for this episode. If you haven't already, you can get your free copy of my book, The Unleashed Human, by going to www.theunleashedhuman.com/unleashed. Again, by going to www.theunleashedhuman.com/unleashed, you can get a copy of my free book to take your life and performance to a whole nother level. Thanks for listening, guys, so much. I honestly appreciate all the support. You guys are so amazing, and I cannot wait to continue to make episodes just like this for you guys every single week. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we'll speak very, very soon. Love you guys. Take care.